The dim glow of the bar's neon lights flickered across the room, casting long shadows over the small group of friends gathered around a table. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but for Liam, the noise felt distant, almost muffled. He sat at the edge of the group, nursing a drink he hadn't touched in over an hour. His eyes kept drifting to Sophia, the girl who had once turned him down, now sitting just a few feet away, laughing with their mutual friends. It had been a year since she'd rejected him, but the memory still stung like a fresh wound. Back then, he'd been a different person, shy, insecure, and unsure of himself. He'd mustered up the courage to ask her out, only to be met with a polite but firm no. It wasn't the rejection itself that hurt the most. It was the way it had shattered his confidence, leaving him feeling invisible and unworthy. But a lot had changed since then. Liam had thrown himself into self-improvement, hitting the gym, working on his career, and building his confidence. He'd even started dating more, though nothing serious had come of it. Yet, no matter how much he'd grown, he couldn't shake the memory of that rejection. It was like a ghost that followed him everywhere, whispering in his ear that he wasn't good enough. And now, here she was, sitting across from him, smiling like nothing had ever happened. The night had started innocently enough. Liam had been invited to a gathering by some new friends he'd made at work. He hadn't expected Sophia to be there, but when he walked in and saw her, his stomach dropped. She looked the same as he remembered, long, dark hair, bright eyes, and that easy smile that had once made his heart race. At first, he'd tried to avoid her, sticking to the edges of the group and keeping his conversations light. But as the night went on, they'd ended up talking, and to his surprise, they'd hit it off. She was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. By the end of the night, they'd made plans for a date. Liam had left the bar, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of him was excited. This was his chance to prove to himself that he was worthy, that he'd moved on. But another part of him couldn't shake the memory of how she'd made him feel a year ago. The first date went well. They'd gone to a cozy little restaurant, and the conversation had flowed easily. Sophia seemed different now, more open, more interested in him. She laughed at his jokes, asked him questions about his life, and even complimented him on how much he'd changed. The second date was even better. They'd gone to a movie, and afterward they'd stayed up late talking, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt like he was finally getting the recognition he deserved. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Why now? Why was she suddenly interested in him? Was it because he'd changed, or was it something else? The next day, Sophia texted him, asking if they could plan another date. Liam stared at his phone, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He thought about how she'd rejected him a year ago, how she'd made him feel like he wasn't good enough. And now, here she was, chasing him. A part of him wanted to say yes, to keep seeing her and see where things went. But another part of him, a darker, angrier part, wanted to make her feel the way she'd made him feel. So he texted back, "Sorry, I'm not interested." Then he muted her notifications and put his phone away. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. Their mutual friend started texting him, asking why he'd ghosted Sophia. She'd apparently been upset, telling everyone how much she'd liked him and how confused she was by his sudden rejection. Liam felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. On one hand, he'd gotten his revenge. He'd made her feel the way she'd made him feel. But on the other hand, He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been petty, that he'd let his anger get the best of him. As the days went by, Liam found himself reflecting on what he'd done. Had he been justified in rejecting Sophia as revenge, or had he just been petty and immature? He thought about how much he'd changed over the past year, how much he'd grown. He'd worked so hard to build his confidence and become a better person. But had he really grown if he was still holding on to the pain of that rejection? In the end, Liam realized that revenge wasn't the answer. Holding on to anger and resentment only weighed him down, keeping him from truly moving on. He'd thought that rejecting Sophia would make him feel better, but all it had done was leave him feeling empty. The real lesson wasn't about getting even. It was about letting go of the past, letting go of the pain, and focusing on the person he wanted to be. Liam never reached out to Sophia again, and she didn't reach out to him. Their mutual friends eventually stopped asking questions, and life went on. But for Liam, the experience was a turning point. It taught him that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it doesn't heal the wounds of the past. The only way to truly move on is to let go of the anger and focus on becoming the best version of yourself. So, was Liam the asshole for rejecting Sophia as revenge, or was he justified in standing up for himself? Let us know in the comments what you think, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.